Well, hello, everyone. It's nice to have you with us this afternoon for a continuation of Series 6 entitled The Pathway to Proactive. This is the second installment of our 6-part program. And what we've tried to do for all of you and the great schools that we work in is to provide really relevant, timely information that gives us content that we can use immediately. So as we go through the information this afternoon, we would challenge each other to please take the content, the PowerPoint, which we'll be sharing with you, and engage in discussions, particularly around our topic area, obviously, of doing data right. So again, Penny Ciaviri, PLC Associates, and we're proud to say that we're now a Scaleris learning company. So we've been acquired by a magnificent organization that's doing incredible things for schools. So with that, off we go. Hopefully everybody had a really good day. So let's start with this, inventory. Doing kind of a checklist and asking in our schools, in our organization, our district, is each of these steadfastly in place? I know that we've been collecting data for quite some time. It's something that's, germane to working in schools. One of the challenges, though, or insights that we're having, are we doing it right? And here are some interesting points to consider. So the first is, how many different data points do you really have in your district or school? We're borrowing from the Pareto principle. Is it the critical few, the things that really matter? Or is it volumes of information and data so that we have the trivial many and we're just swimming in data points and essentially not doing anything really well with regard to taking action around these data points? The next one, and I love talking about this, is the model of concentric circles. So you'll see shortly what we mean by that, with students at the center, and then the bands move out from there. In the concentric circle model, we're looking at the right drivers. And this is a lot of Michael Fullen's research. We know, scientifically and empirically from a research base and the great meta-analysis that Dr. Marzano has provided for us, what drives results in districts. So we want the data points to be connected, right, to those things that matter. The next is, as we look at information and collect data, is it following a particular cadence, meaning it's intentional, it's scheduled? Can you go to our calendar and know for certain when we're looking at what data, whether it's common formative assessments or high stakes year-end evaluations, which actually are lagging indicators? We're much more in favor of doing the leading indicators that will give us the information in real time. Do all the data points have follow-up actions? Or do we say, hey, that was a great data workshop. We went through the information, we glazed right over it, and now back to what? Business as usual, without any interventions or follow-up strategies. And is it fair to say that data is a center point in the organization? So people know their contribution margin. I am a classroom teacher, I'm grade 3, grade 5, or I'm secondary. Do you also see it as your individual personal responsibility to contribute to the conversations around data points? So at PLC Associates, we have a wonderful model that we'd love to work with schools around, and that's entitled Data-Informed Continuous Improvement. And I'll show you how this works exactly. So if we do have data-informed continuous improvement in place, it exists when you'll see the description. And at the risk of reading, I know you can all read, but I'd like to highlight a few things. Have we designed and delivered a comprehensive, right, across the board, so it hits the right touch points, data set and process matching exactly to what the school or the district wants to assess and use as targets along the way? And is it set for ongoing longitudinal analysis and actions? So we look at student results, teaching and learning results, leadership kinds of behaviors. We'll show you that with the leverage leadership inventory, and monitor over time, are we moving in the right direction? Because ultimately, we want schools to be self-directed, perpetuating systems that always produce those great results. And that depends upon the infrastructure. Or Do we press, as you see here at the bottom, the default button? And default means I'm not quite sure what data we have in place. I know folks at central office have certain data points that they probably look at, but it's not really known to the organization. We can't afford to press the default button because that essentially says that it's no longer purposeful or intentional. And we want this to be a very intentional process all the way through. So in terms of activating our data cycles, and we know this is an ongoing and very dynamic process, there are certain metrics. We like to use metrics instead of surveys. Just the connotation of metrics is so much more scientific based. And sometimes when you say surveys, folks just sort of glaze over and think, oh yeah, that's, not really meaningful. It's perceptual data. Well, it's not really true, because when those performance benchmarks are linked to research-based kinds of instructional practices and curricula, they're the questions and allows us to query the things that matter. So from our critical lens, and you'll see some examples, we think the PLC organizational assessment is premier for looking at, do we have the structure in place? Have we built the foundation? And do we have the wherewithal to look at those things that are really important from that more global perspective? Data Triangle gets right into culture, professional reflection learning tool. We've, crossed paths with a lot of other organizations. I've never seen this anywhere out there. So if people find something like it, let me know. We're very proud of this. It lets us have insights into what our teachers say they're able to do vis-a-vis instructional practices and what still remains in terms of challenges. And then the leverage leadership inventory. Again, we'll see examples of that. So here's the model, concentric circles. We know students are at the center, that's irrefutable. And you have in place your unit assessments, maybe your real-time exit tickets, your common formatives, quick quizzes, all of the things that teachers utilize over the academic year to take that kind of dipstick into what are our students showing us that they're able to do, and where do we need to go next in terms of instructional practices. So the next thing at PLC that we ask ourselves is, who supports? What's the next band? The next band would be our teachers, pedagogy and curricula. So enter in the PRLT. This is fantastic. Once more, for points of entry, when we do professional learning, and oh, by the way, if you're doing professional development, crash that model, because people don't want to be developed. Now, would you like to engage in energetic professional learning? Of course, that's so much more respectful, and it connects with who we are as excellent educators and veteran professionals. So the PRLT, next question to ask, who's supporting our teachers, our leaders, our school leaders, principals, assistant principals, directors, coordinators, etc. And there are particular leadership practices way beyond the ethereal, not just talking about service leadership or I'm in charge of making sure we have a really happy culture. No, we're talking about, again, the right drivers. So what are those competencies that if we have individually and as a leadership team, let's say we have, 3 or to 5 people on our school-based leadership team, and then that spans out to the entire district team. What are we looking like with regard to collective leadership efficacy? So we invented the LLI, and that's been in place for about 10 years now. Next, the organizational assessment, and you'll see some of the foundational items that are critical for the underpinnings. And what's the outside? Unless we keep the culture moving, the research tells us that we can implement various programs, new curricula, instructional strategies, move things around structurally. If we don't have that sense of how we work together, and this isn't, the soft side, it's important. What the expectations are, what our aspirations are, we all understand the vision and mission critical. That's what keeps the fabric of the organization tight and able to stay on that path of sustained results. So into some of the tools here. This is the famous, right, professional reflection learning tool. And you see what we pulled out, there are 5 areas. It's student ownership of learning. It is engagement, higher order questioning, and checking for understanding, targeted student feedback, and then differentiated instruction and practice. So here is the category of checking for understanding. What pops out? Well, we have the stoplight color coding, which is consistent with all of our reports. And you'll see moving from awareness, I've heard of this, emerging, I can kind of sort of do this well, proficient and mastery. We take proficient and mastery, put it together, and that gives us our M/P score. We want this to be in the high yellow or green. Why? If we have teachers consistently applying research-based best practices in their classroom, then too, we have assurances of having a higher probability of our students doing really well. So let's pull a few things out here. Looking at number 3, this is one of my favorites, and there's the research annotation, David Sousa. Apply effectively the 10 teach to reflect rule. So what did he tell us from his research base? That we can't go much more than 10 minutes without asking some sort of reflection, processing question with our students. It could be a turn and talk, it could be a quick write, it could be some sort of other protocol, but we have to move away from, and I know many of us obviously have, so kudos and congratulations there, the person in the front of the room and the kids have their heads down on the desk and maybe some of them drooling or sleeping, whatever. That's not an engaged, dynamic classroom. But by design, we can change that if we know this particular research base. And it's also consistent with if we look at number 8 here. Do we have at least 10 protocols or routines for building understanding in a topic known by the class? So think of anchor charts. If we only have a few things in our tool chest, and maybe we do the popsicle stick thing as where I know that's popular with calling on certain students, if that's all we've got, that gets really mundane, quickly. But what if we had like 10 dynamic protocols with those anchor charts all the way around the classroom, and we said to students, okay, we're going to get into inside outside circle. The students know how to do that, and the transition time for going from one activity to another is dramatically reduced because it's a routine, it's a ritual. So this gives us a really good idea, as you see. And teachers, I so applaud you for being honest and candid as you're responding to these survey questions. And we say that to them, at the beginning, please let us know it's completely confidential and no one's name, of course, is ever shared. We're able to give the composite data back to you. So who plans professional learning? Well, we at PLC support that and deliver it, obviously, but we plan it. And I'm so proud to say this as well. We co-construct it with the school. So it's not ever, you'll never see us behave in such a way where we come in with swoop in with a cape and we're the smartest people in the room. No, that's not the way that we do it. So the PRLT. The next one, now looking at the following band, right? So who supports the teachers? Here's an excerpt from the Leverage Leadership Inventory. We have performance benchmarks 10 through 18. And this is a real data set. So we look at the situation in the academic year 2021 as opposed to 21-22. Look at the gains here. As leaders completed this set of metrics and asked themselves, questions in terms of, let's say, number 10, do we intentionally use existing school structures, our grade level, our content meetings, faculty meetings, to reinforce instructional messaging and the kinds of things that we're working on? Or do we say, press the default button again, right? Just, do whatever you think you need to do. What happens? It's a slippery slope. Sometimes not even being totally aware of what's happening, our grade level and our content area teams, our professional learning communities, if you're using the DeFore model, will slip into, well, let's talk about Johnny today. He was wild in my class. How was he in yours? Or we have our field trip coming up. Let's go over some details as we have time. That opportunity, when we're together with our colleagues and all brains are in the game, premier opportunity to really discuss the things that are going to make a difference classroom level, and then having the internal commitment, hey, let's this entire week really hone in on this strategy for checking for understanding and see what happens and how our students are responding. Number 13, the data dashboard. Is that in place, whether it's on some internal protocol within the school, or do we have charts up? Do we know where we are, moving in the right direction? Attendance would be a great one that could be focused outward. It's not breaking any confidentiality rules. So we look at those attendance rates. We know if students aren't in seats, their chances of absorbing the learning are very much diminished. So what I like about this is, as leaders, we can query, there are 25 benchmarks, and ask ourselves sincerely, how am I looking? Who's showing up this year as the school leader? What competencies am I really great at, and where do I need to up my game? Just like professional learning reflection tool, then as we're doing support for leaders, we have the right points of entry. And I love the fact that our superintendents and our assistant superintendents and academic officers tell us it is phenomenal to know the collective look of our leadership group and teams. So we can see in 21-22 these kinds of gains. That tells us we're strengthening individually and we're strengthening as a team. Terrific. And I love the conversations that come as a result of examining the data. So we're continuing our march through, the concentric circles. And next up is the infrastructure piece. Now, whenever I say infrastructure, sometimes people just sort of glaze over and they hear the word and think, what is the mysterious thing going on here? Well, schools are made up of structures, right? We have data cycles, we have professional learning, we have assessments, just go through the plethora of structures within the organization. Now, inside those structures, and here are 25 foundational elements or structures, we have practices. So we talked about data cycles, just mentioned as a structure. Within those structures, we have to perfect our practices. Why? Because you could have data cycles in place and be saying, this is, fantastic. Of course, we have data cycles and we visit information on a quarterly basis, but we never really close the loop. Nothing happens, from it. That tells us that we could have ineffectual practices inside a structure. Now, when you put like a puzzle pieces together and the structures are there, they're named, but what we do within those structures, the practices are not what they need to be, we can't say it's legitimate. So what the organizational audit does, and this is a central office leadership team type of conversation, it can span out to whomever you might want to include, but we go systematically through each one of these areas. They're defined in depth. We process key questions. We're able to score it, right? Using the 1 to 4 rubric. And then what pops out right away? We're seeing here, number 19 and 20, looking at MTSS and early identification strategies along with differentiation and scaffolding, not, in the right direction. This district feels that they're a level 4 in terms of accountable culture with peer-to-peer responsibility. So we all hold each other. This is, again, a Michael Fullen kind of thing with quadrant 4, right? Internal and external accountability. We're there. So the question we're going to ask is, if you are a 4, and everybody agrees to that because this is the composite scoring with rubric, what's the evidence of that? So even in situations where we think we're doing fantastic work, minus the evidence, that calls into question. So what? Now what? So what? Once we have this content, can you see how it puts the district and the various schools in the driver's seat? So if there are missing pieces of that puzzle, we'll know what they are and we can plug those pieces in. Just like in strategic planning, we never start with a blank sheet of paper and say, okay, let's just redo, right? From the beginning, new vision, new mission, new beliefs, new strategic intents, new strategies. No, that's not the way to design effective organizations. There are pieces that, are already working. So we respect that. And then we go for the other components to make the whole picture. So you see, without the organizational audit, again, default button, do we have it? I don't know. I assume we do. We have people in positions that know whether or not this is in place. That's not going to wash, right? So what we're going for here and what we at PLC really want to be able to help our schools do is select the metrics, the measurements that are perfectly connected to your preferences and making sure those concentric circles, we have everything responded to. Let's say we have the organizational audit in place. So we did look at the big picture and globally, what we look like, but we have no idea if professional learning is sticking and what's happening as a result. Just think of the money and the resources that have gone into professional learning 101 to no avail. So this is like brass tacks and gets down to, again, those right drivers. So that outward band of the data triangle and culture, enter in our student voice at the elementary, secondary level, the school performance scan. We also don't leave out individuals and support staff positions. Who are they? Our cafeteria workers, transportation, unless it's an outsourced kind of situation, teacher aides, clerical. You have to be able to argue the fact that it's true that these individuals and groups of people are connecting with our students. I mean, I think of my own children, as we're putting them on the bus in the morning, and I would just cross my fingers that everything would go well in transportation, because that transportation specialist, I have to say that because my mother was a transportation specialist, not a bus driver, has a whole lot to contribute in terms of making that student's morning go well. So support services on the other side of the triangle here, families and community. So we put together the kinds of questions that families would be able to answer. And let's not disregard there are other people, right, in the community who are residents, grandparents, aunts and uncles, other individuals who don't have children enrolled. So there are certain kinds of questions that we can ask of them if indeed we want our school district to be heralded as the hub, one of the hubs of the community. Okay, so that's culture. And here are some excerpts. As you'll see, the model follows along with a color coding. Look at the data that we're able to glean. This is from the student voice. So teachers provide, number 24, time for students to discuss topics and learn from each other. Is that in place? Is it just teacher to student, student to teacher, which promotes a certain kind of processing? Or for our astute educators, are we then taking it out to student, pairing up, partnering up, students working in groups? Why is that important? It changes the need for processing, right? When a teacher delivers a certain question, it's constructed in such a way that students will be able to respond in kind. But what happens when we're in the dynamic nature of a discussion? Students are offering various perspectives and pieces of information. You have to process simultaneously all that those in your group are contributing. So we want that to to be in place. Number 19, do teachers ask questions that make me think? What's the difference between what students are saying and what staff members are saying? Thus driving another great conversation. I love the fact that teachers are not afraid of this. They're not afraid of putting student responses next to teacher responses and then having those driving discussions that we know matter and make things better. Here's an example of the school performance scan, same model. And this is looking at the initial questions around school leadership. Fair? 100%. And school leaders, we are absolutely resilient, true, and able to handle any kind of incoming information and feedback. So number 15, we see our school leaders promote continuous improvement for all. That's 74.2%. That's going into the upper echelon, just about to break green. If I were a school leader, I would want this feedback because it tells me, you know, what my colleagues essentially are saying about how I'm showing up, right, in my leadership within the organization. Little concerning with item number 1 and item 18. So if this were your school, we'd have to ask the question, hey, wait a minute. Do we really have a school-based plan? And is it known to the entire population in terms of what's in there? Or is that something that we did it over the summer. We had to put a check in the box to respond to our State Department. In school-wide data system, that's what this conversation and discussion is all about, the right data points in a purposely designed, intentional system that doesn't throw numbers ad nauseum, right, to people, but it gives us just what we need to make some astute decisions moving forward. And then the crosswalk. How great is this? Well, we can do the comparative analysis. So similar question, what did staff say, students and families? And how do we explain this? I really enjoy when districts are courageous and brave enough to put not just their staff members in data workshops, but students, mix the students in and let's ask students, is this consistent with how you see the organization? And then to get more content behind some of the ways that the students responded. Is this what you expected? Is there anything shocking? Is there anything that you're surprised at? All those questions lead to good things for the classroom experience. And asking students for it to be an optimal environment, as a learner, what do you need? What makes learning more interesting and easier to access the content and the information? So I know we just have a couple of minutes left. Actually, we have one. So I'm just going to show you a few excerpts from other metrics that you might want to include. This is the social, emotional, developmental health, diversity, opportunity, inclusion assessment. There are 10 different areas. You're able to choose from 100 benchmarks and ask some of the kinds of questions that have become really important coming through the pandemic, I would say especially. Here's another example from relationships. Questions around diversity, opportunity. And I'll end with this. This is an adaptation of something that Victoria Bernhardt put forth. The final checklist. What level are you at? We've talked about the ultimate is obviously level 5 here, where you do have a comprehensive set of metrics that cover the concentric circles. That's why we developed this at PLC. We want you to be able to use us in this regard. So phone a friend, call us, let us know. And for those districts that are kind of wandering around at level 1, not really intentional continuous improvement, or we're fragmented, we think somebody has put in place the data points. We'll wait to hear what we need to do in terms of getting together. No, that's not it. That is not data-informed continuous improvement. What makes it great, colleagues, and we'll end on this, is you've designed it to fit exactly. And we're not doing the cast of thousands of data points and the trivial many Pareto principles we said at the beginning. We are doing only the things that we can wrap our arms around, understand, and they're the metrics that matter. So that's it. Hope you had a great afternoon. It was fun spending 29.5 minutes with you, and we'll see you for our next session in Series 6. Thank you all.